This FAQ is better in text. Follow the link in the description to my blog, and many of the answers will have links to expanded answers. Also, due to the nature of this FAQ, I'm not scrolling the text.
Do you really believe that Matthew wrote in Hebrew?
Yup.
Does that mean that the whole New Testament was written in Hebrew?
Nope.
Can you give me your reasons in 1,000 words or less?
Kinda, yeah, sure. There's a link on the blog post.
Didn't Matthew quote the LXX?
Nope.
Wasn't the whole New Testament written in Greek?
Nope.
Didn't Matthew copy Mark?
Yup.
But that means you can't believe that Matthew was written first.
That's a very keen observation.
Didn't Matthew and Luke copy Q?
Nope. Or at least, not the way some think.
Aren't all of your sources late?
Yes. Relative to other New Testament books. However, this isn't particularly unusual for documents written in Hebrew. The Hebrew text of Esther has almost no representation before the 11th century. Even the Dead Sea Scrolls have only a few fragments of Esther, and they include commentary that link it to the Dead Sea Scrolls Community's War Scroll. That means that they could be a commentary on Esther, not the book itself. So if you're reading a version of Esther translated from the Hebrew instead of the Greek, you're reading a version of Esther translated from a base text, which has support only slightly older than the SDM family of Hebrew Matthew. This principle doesn't just apply to Esther, though. Nehemiah has also only had a few small fragments found at Qumran. Similar to Esther, anything outside these small fragments is based entirely on manuscripts from the Middle Ages. The same goes for the vast majority of Ezra. The only fragments of Ezra from before the Middle Ages are Q4117 from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that only contains intermittent fragments from chapters 4 to 6. For the vast majority of translations of the Old Testament, there are two primary manuscripts that are considered. The highest authority manuscript is the Aleppo Codex. It is missing some material, though. Where it is lacking, there is a near twin in the text of the Leningrad Codex. Any interpretations that come from outside those sources are likely to be marked with a footnote. This includes if they incorporate material from the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Septuagint. If you pick up a reader's Hebrew Bible, such as that published by the Jewish Publication Society, it will stick very closely to the text of these two medieval manuscripts. In fact, it will very likely be the digital version of the Leningrad Codex.
What's the best evidence?
That's subjective. For me, the most convincing evidence is that Hebrew Matthew suggests a complete, unified theory that includes and explains all the data, including the synoptic problem, early church testimony, apparent assimilation in the Greek text compared to the SDM family, linguistic elements in Hebrew both in dialogue and structural parts of the Gospel, and linguistic patterns in the Greek edition of Matthew's Gospel. The theory of Greek primacy for Matthew has to dismiss the early church fathers, has to imagine an unknown Q Gospel to explain the synoptic problem, can't explain the apparent assimilation in the Greek edition when compared against the SDM family, and has to ignore the Hebrew linguistic elements, especially in the structural parts of the Gospel of Matthew. To me, that's the best evidence.
Aren't all the Hebrew wordplays and such only in dialogue, indicating that the speakers might have spoken Hebrew but the book wasn't written in Hebrew? No. There are several cases where the linguistic elements are in structural parts of the documents. These include Chapter 8 verse 32, the alliteration.
בשר ובסעיף.
Chapter 9 verse 9 versus chapter 10 verse 13. The Hebrew text spells the name, Matthew, different in these two places, but the Greek does not. Chapter 12 verses 14 through 16. There's a wordplay between
פרושים.
and.
פרסם.
Chapter 21 verse 12. There's a wordplay in. Chapter 21 verse 12. There's a wordplay in.
שולחנות השולחניים.
These cases can't be explained by a Semitic background to the people in the text since they aren't records of spoken words. There are also some cases of alteration in the Greek edition of Matthew that are structural, but only where Matthew copied from Mark. There are also cases of alliteration in dialogue in the Greek edition of Matthew without parallels, and that suggests that these conversations were originally in Greek. For example, a lot of the Sermon on the Mount has alliteration in Greek, with a few sections that have wordplays or rhymes when written in Hebrew or Aramaic. This shows that Jesus spoke at least those three languages.
Where is there evidence that the Greek text demonstrates assimilation?
Matthew 3 verse 11 in the Greek of many manuscripts end with baptize you in the Holy Spirit and fire. This matches Luke 3 verse 16 exactly. However, the Hebrew editions almost universally read baptize you in the fire of the Holy Spirit. Matthew 10 verse 1 through 4 is also clearly a sign of assimilation in the Greek text. The first half of the list of apostles is changed to match Luke. The order is different between Hebrew and Greek. Matthew 27 verse 46 in the Greek includes an interpretation of Jesus' statement. The Hebrew does not include that interpretation. It might be interesting to note that the phrase is actually Aramaic, not Hebrew. Except that in the Greek, the transliteration follows Hebrew pronunciation rather than Aramaic pronunciation. This makes sense if the translator from Hebrew to Greek were thinking of Mark 15 verse 34. I've already given some more thoughts on this in the section on translation hiccups. Matthew 8 verse 32, the Hebrew editions skip over Jesus telling the demons to go. This information is pulled in from the parallel passages in Mark 5 verse 13 and Luke 8 verse 32. Seeing that the Hebrew skips this also brings us in contact with the rule. The reading is less likely to be original that shows a disposition to smooth away difficulties. Adding in Jesus telling the demons to go definitely smooths over the difficulty that they leave with the command being only implied by the text. Matthew 3 verse 3 and Mark 1 verse 3 both quote Isaiah 40 verse 3. In the Hebrew, Matthew actually quotes the verse. Interestingly, if this quote had been taken from the Septuagint, we wouldn't be able to tell if the Hebrew or the Greek were original. However, in the Greek, Mark changes our God to him. This obviously doesn't change the meaning of the verse at all. However, since both the Greek edition of Matthew and Mark make the same change, it shows that one of them gets the change from the other. This makes sense under my theory that the translator of Matthew from Hebrew to Greek translated parallel passages to match.
Why do you make the Hebrew text available for free on your sources page?
As opposed to what?
Publishing it as a book.
I did.
But everything in the book is on your blog for free.
That is a very keen observation.
But why do you make it available for free?
I think we're going in circles now.
Let's try this the other way then. Why do you make a print version available?
Because I recognize that there are reasons to want the text in print. Past that, I assign myself 4 projects per year. Writing is an important part of my mental health regimen. A project is finished when it is in print. This gives me a way to acknowledge a finishing point for the project of Masoretic Matthew.
Where did you go to school?
St. Helens Senior High School in St. Helens, Oregon, class of '97.
No, I mean seminary.
I didn't go to seminary.
Then where did you get your master's degree?
I don't have any advanced or graduate degrees.
Then where did you learn all this?
Books, the internet, I listen to lectures by people with THDS and MDivs, stuff like that. I am self-taught. I did go back to school to get my associate's degree. I finished that up in 2020. But the attempt to stop me included a global pandemic, so I've decided that's as far as I'm going for a while. You're welcome.
Should I really believe you over my pastor/teacher that says that Matthew was written in Greek?
I'm not really here to tell anyone what they should believe. If you're not in a place to look at the evidence, I suggest that you follow the consensus. That means go with the current Nestle Aland or United Bible Society Greek New Testament. In any area where you are not personally doing a deep dive, follow the majority consensus of experts. Don't just follow some guy on the internet. If you read my evidence and you don't find it compelling, follow the evidence. And please let me know what you think I got wrong. If I'm wrong about this, I want to know. If there's a hole in my logic that I can plug, I want to know that as well. If you read my evidence and you think it's compelling but you have existing commitments to the majority scholarship position through your school, your church, family, friends, whatever, then stick with the majority consensus. Maybe find subtle ways to bring up my arguments, then report back to me the things that work and the things that don't. But dude, this isn't worth losing your job or a friend over. Be sensible. If you read my evidence and you think it's compelling but you have existing commitments to another minority position, then try to find subtle ways to let people know about my position. Don't come out for me, but maybe make it clear you're not convinced that the other minority position is right in private. If you're convinced I'm right, and you don't have a measurable risk, then when it comes up in natural conversation, then let people know where you stand. Offer to buy them a copy of my book.
Are you a heretic?
I really don't like the word heretic. I'm a heretic to some because I generally attend Protestant churches. I'm a heretic to others because I eat pork. I'm sure if you look hard enough, you'll find something that you and I disagree on that you can call a heresy. That said, I subscribe to the 4 great creeds: Apostles, Nicene, Athanasian, and Chalcedonian. So whatever that means to you in terms of heresy or orthodoxy, there's that.
Are you a Nazarene Christian or a Judaizer?
No. I rather enjoy pork, generally attend church on Sunday, and don't keep track of Jewish holidays. If you do, that's fine. You do you. But I'm just not that concerned about those things.
What do you mean when you say that anyone can use this Hebrew text for anything they want for free as long as they give a link back to your sources page? What does free mean?
Free as in no cost. Once the document is stable, I will probably release it to the public domain. Until then, I want people to be able to get back to the most up-to-date version without difficulty. When I first became a majority text guy, the first online version of the Robinson-Pierpont Greek New Testament that I found didn't have accents or breathings or punctuation. I put weeks into trying to find a digital version that did and couldn't. A few years later, I put a month into looking for it and did. I don't know if the version with breathing and punctuation didn't exist the first time, or if the fact that it was public domain just meant that people could pass it around without, so they did. I want to spare people that frustration. Since it's still a living document that I'm adding to, I want people to be able to get back to the newest version easily.
Are you using one of the Creative Commons licenses?
No. I really should get more familiar with them, but my only concern is that this is a living document and I want people to find the best, most up-to-date version of the text. If you can make money off the text or it can advance your career or whatever, more power to you. Creative Commons seems motivated by trying to make sure that the money or fame for a thing gets back to the originator, which isn't me in this case, it's God. Besides that, I've made some editorial decisions. The main text is primarily the text of the Paris manuscript, with footnotes to give majority readings. Someone might prefer to choose majority readings for their main text. A lot of the Creative Commons licenses would frown on that. I would not. But I still want those people's audience to get the newest version if they're interested. And someone might make other editorial decisions, and that's worth knowing and worth being able to get back to the source text.
Can I use your text as a background text in a video game I'm making?
That's strange. But yes. Just let people know where you got the text in case I update it.
Can I include part of your text in my website?
Yes. Just give people the link back to my blog so that they can get the updated text if I change it.
I think I can debunk the Hebrew Matthew using your text. Can I use it for that?
Absolutely. And link back to my blog, and then also let me know so that I can read your case. Maybe you'll change my mind.
I'm a Messianic Jew and I want to use your Hebrew Matthew in services. May I print it in the bulletin?
Yes. Include my web address so that people can see updates if they want.
There's a guy in my church that reads Hebrew. Could I take it to him and have him check it out?
Of course. A lot of people evaluate things better when they're printed, so you should print it or get the book first. If you print it yourself, just make sure to include the link back to my site. If they think they spot a typo, they should check the most recent version.
Is there any way to read what this version of Matthew says in English that's less expensive than the corrected King James Version?
Yes. On my sources page, I have a translation into modern English that I made decades ago. It's up for free. I would like to do a new translation, but I'm waiting until my base text is stable.
Can I get the Masoretic Matthew in print?
Yes. It's perpetually out of date because the online version is a living document and updating the print version is a lot more effort. But there is a print version on Amazon. The version currently in print is 0.75, so it's already a little behind. That said, I do understand that there are reasons to get the paperback.
You have alternate readings in the Masoretic Matthew. Which readings do you think are closest to the original?
Oh wow. Let's start with a pond of nuance. I'm not a trained text critic, and I don't play one on television. I think that the attempt to get back to the original of a document is a fool's errand. That much said, as someone saying something remarkably close to, "It can't be done," I recognize that my part in the process is to get out of the way of the people doing it. Maybe in the end I'll be vindicated, and we will come to the conclusion that our percentage of certainty about the original text will never get close to 100%. Or maybe I'll be proven wrong, and we will get a near 100% certainty to the text of the whole New Testament. But if they do get to that point, it will be because they ignored my pessimism. And good for them for doing so. That nuance out of the way, I think that it's rather on the easy side to extract the text in which God sheep hear God's words. John 10 verse 27, this will be something remarkably close to the majority text. I have also made cure readings for Hebrew Matthew, where the majority of Hebrew Matthew manuscripts diverge from the Paris manuscript. As I did this, I thought it was remarkable how close the resulting text was to the majority Greek text. So yes, if I'm picking a reading to be right, I'm picking the cure reading on Matthew and the majority text for the Greek portions of the New Testament. This may or may not be close to the text that flowed off the pen of the original author. I don't know, and I don't think there's a good way to know. I do think that it's very close to the text of the first few centuries, when the text became stable under the supervision of scribes and theologians following the voice of God that they heard from the apostles. At any rate, it's very close in substance to other attempts to restore Matthew to the original state, and I find that comforting.